question that we need to, of course, ask ourselves is Mehechatesa, who Reb Chaim was, and the way he lived his life is so far, I speak to myself, is so far from who I am and from what, how do we connect to this? How do we understand the real significance? If Chocham Shemeis HaKoil Kroivov, as the Gemara says in Shabbos, a Chocham dies, we are all Kroivim. Do you know what that means? The greater the Chocham, the closer he was to us. If Chas v'Shalom, le'aleinu v'le'aleichem, a father, a mother, a brother, a sister, a daughter passes away, we're impacted, our lives falls apart. How do we continue? And we need to somehow manage to understand the impact that Chocham, a world without Reb Chaim, is like a world without a close relative for every single Yid. Whether we knew it, whether we realized it, whether we understand it, that's a reality. And we need to try and work out, how do we get there? Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein at Shlita at the Hesped quoted the Drasha Saran. He said, the Ran writes in Drashas, Pam hoysa shchina ba derech beis hamikdosh. Hayoim hi ba derech hachachomim. Umi shehu yoyse godel batoira v'koshur latoira yesh lo yoyse shchina. There was a time when our connection to the Rebbeinu Shalom came through something called Nevuah, through a Mokim Kodesh. But after Churban Abayis, after the time there is no more Nevuah, then Kedusha and connection to the Rebbeinu Shalom comes from one place only, and that is Torah. Lashon Ramban in Bava Basra Yud Beis, Reb Tzadok HaKohen quotes it regularly. Yoidim ha'emes beruach hakodesh shebatoicham. Chazal, Klali, the Talmidei Chachomim shebechol dor v'dor, they know what the Rebbeinu Shalom thinks, and through their connection to Limud HaTorah, they are connected to the Rebbeinu Shalom. What do you say about somebody miyom omdoi al datoi, from the moment that he had any seichel, never ever stopped learning Torah lishma? Somebody who didn't even know his own address. He didn't know where he lived. He had no clue where he lived. They say a story. I don't know if it's true, but it doesn't matter. They don't say it about me. Maybe they say it about you. The story about when he went to the Lishkat HaGiyus for the tzava. There's two girusois of this story. I haven't been able to verify which one is true. It doesn't matter. And they asked him, the draft for the IDF, where do you live? He said, I don't know. Where do you live? What do you do? He said, Kol Chazanish. And where is that? I don't know. I go out of my house. I turn left. I don't know. And they wrote, Beis Shin. He went home and he asked the stipler, what's Beis? The IDF, they passed like Beis Shammai. He said, no, Bilti Shafui. Mushugina. Doesn't know where he lives. He did not know his own address. Why do you need to know your own address? I know. You go to this way, you go to Kol Chazon Ish, you go to Lederman, then you go home. He never gave a shir. He just sat and learned Torah, Lishma. He never had a job, no official position, no politics, nothing. Torah and the Rabbeinu Shalom, nothing else. His entire life. 68 years ago, when the Chazon Ish was nifta, so a group of his Talmidim got in a taxi and they went to see the Briskerov. They said this story when I learned in Brisk. They went to see the Briskerov and they said, "Was wird sein? What's going to be? The Chazon Ish is nicht da. There's no more Chazon Ish. What will be with Torah?" And the Chazon Ish and the Briskerov said, "Don't worry, Kilo Sishochach mi Pizaroi. There will always be Gedolim and Chachomim. It's terrible. It's a big Aveda. Don't worry, Torah will continue. There will be a Messiah of a new Torah of Gedolim. But who's going to be? Who can be a Rebbe now? Who can be a Mamala Mokim?" And the Briskerov said it as follows. Zwei Wörter habe ich gehört von der Bavrom Yeshaya. Forgive my Yiddish. He said, I heard two things from the Chazon Ish, said the Briskerov. Number one, mein Chaimke is Mora de Kula Talmuda. Mein Chaimke is Mora de Kula Talmuda. He was 26 years old at the time. This is 68 years ago. The Briskerov said that he heard from the Chazon Ish, mein Chaimke is Mora de Kula Talmuda. My Chaim is the master of Torah, of all of the Talmud, all of the Gemara. Und die zweite Sache, was ich gehört von Rabbi Avram Yeshaya, ist Halacha kemoisoi b'chol mokim. So the Briskerov, 68 years ago, Rabbi Chaim his father was the stipler. He was 26 years old. Halacha kemoisoi b'chol mokim, ve'idach perushahi. Gesundheit. It'll all be okay. We have an understanding, we have a hasoga of who this was. Reb Shach, Chaim Nevracha, sent a Teimani Bocher. There was a Bocher in Ponovich, a Teimani Bocher, and he was having difficulty in Shidduchim. Didn't have Hatzlach in Shidduchim. He went to Reb Shach, said, what should I do? Reb Shach said, I have an eitzah for you. Go and make a chavrusa with Reb Chaim. Have a chavrusa with Reb Chaim. It's very choshev. Hopefully, people will hear you have a chavrusa with Reb Chaim, you'll get a shidduch. You'll do a Reb Chaim daven Vasikin always. He chapped Reb Chaim straight after Vasikin, and he told him, Reb Shach sent me to you. I'm Teimani Bocha, I need a shidduch. Maybe we can make a kvias. Maybe the Rebbe can with me learn, and maybe we can learn together. And Reb Chaim said to him, he stopped, he thought for a second, he said, okay. 2 Tanoim, there's 2 conditions. We can learn straight after Shachris, after Vasikin, every day, 4 daf in 20 minutes. But you have to prepare first. You have to prepare it so you kind of know it first, and we'll do 4 daf in 20 minutes every day, and the second try is every single day of the year. No excuses. You agree to those conditions, Beseda. And they started learning. A year and a half later, when they'd finished Shas 1.5 times, he became a chosen. To a girl from Tzafon, somewhere in the north. And he persuaded the Shver, he said, please make the vote, make the L'chaim, somewhere here, very close. He found somewhere in Rechov Rashbam to make the vote. Because maybe Reb Chaim will come. He went to Reb Chaim after learning. That morning, Reb Chaim, he said, es kommt mir a Mazel Tov. I'm a chosen. He said, Mazel Tov. He said, please, Rebbe, we specially made the vote right next to here. Would you come tonight for 1 minute to come and say Chaim? He said, yeah, Mazel Tov. He said, tell me, by the way, what's your name? Until then, it wasn't Negea. What's his name? They've learned one shas 1.5 times together. Didn't know his name. What's an Afghan? What didn't you know your name for? Now he's a bacha, he's a chosen, he needs to mishpacha. Anything that wasn't Torah didn't sort of nicht interessiert. It was irrelevant. You have to understand, this is a life of just Torah. Nothing else. When Rav Moshe Reichman, in the 1980s, I remember, he was the big gevir who was giving away millions and tens of millions of dollars to all the Mostas HaTorah. And they brought him into Reb Chaim. And they said to him, Shalom Aleichem, this is the Reichman. He said, Reichman, they gave out the Meiri and Eruvin, published the Meiri and Eruvin? No, okay, whatever, weiter. These are not, just to understand, this is just to understand who Reb Chaim was. Reb Rosenblum writes, he says, Tovshin Tes, not that long ago, after B'dikas Chometz, he started preparing some shiurim for Pesach, and he had written down in one of his machbarot, Ozroiv Nisim Ifleisa Balaylo, and one of them he had written down in one of his books, but he hadn't written a Makor, that Avraham Avinu went down to Ur-Kasdim and came out, B'neis, on Pesach, but he didn't know where it was, so he has a friend who has Oitza HaChochma, the computer, so he called friend, he's still doing B'dikas Chometz. He called him back 15 minutes later, and he puts in all sort of string searches, Ur, Kasdim, Pesach, Avram, Neis, thing, garnished. It's a chochma, the computer doesn't know. What can you do? He called Reb Chaim. Reb Chaim never spoke on the phone. Reb Chaim spoke on the phone twice in his life. He used a telephone twice in his life. Once, when there was Aguda, there was somebody, he heard that somebody was boregus with him. Somebody had thought that Reb Chaim said something bad about him. So Reb Chaim, for him, that he'd been poigeya, he'd hurt another Yid, he spoke to him on the phone and said, Chas v'shalom, I never said anything about you. That was once. And the other time was when Reb Shlomo had a very important, very critical operation in America, and he called to wish him refuah shlema. Those are the 2 times he used a phone in his life. So Reb Baruch calls the Gabba, and he says, is Reb Chaim still up? Yes, he's still up. So ask him, I can't find the Litman cop that there's Avraham Avinu gets saved from Ur Kasdim on Pesach, but I can't find it anywhere. So go and ask Reb Chaim, is it? Reb Chaim said, yeah, Agodos shel Pesach la Barbanel. On the spot. Nishkan Bavli, not Yerushalmi. In Mir, when they were learning Nedarim, there were 2 Bochrim that were schmoozing in the middle of Seder. It happens, apparently. And Reb Nochem Patzovitz, the Mir Rosh Hashiva, walked in. So immediately they're Tonu Rabbanon. So Reb Nochem went over to them and said, in Nedarim, Tonu Rabbanon zelo mofia, not once. There's no Tonu Rabbanon in Nedarim. But that's the beginning of the Maisa. And they told this over to Reb Chaim, and Reb Chaim said, no, in Daf Chav Zayin steht de Tonu Rabbanon. But Mistama the Bachrim didn't say, de Tonu Rabbanon. Reb Michal Sorotzkin from Ben Shemesh says a Maisa about somebody that he knows personally. An Osher in Europe was married for 23 years. Nebuch didn't have any children. Sold his business to a modern Orthodox Jew in Switzerland, many millions of dollars. He decided he's retiring. He bought a nice house in Ramat Gan. He went into Reb Chaim. They started thinking they were going to adopt a child. So he went into Reb Chaim. He wanted to ask a bracha. They want to be ma'ametz. They want to adopt a child. So Reb Chaim said to him, Lama la'ametz yiladim? Why do you want to adopt? He said, Anachnu nesuim kvar. It's 23 years. I'm 50, 51. Reb Chaim said, 50 or 51? Are you 50? He said, I'm 50. No, lama shelo yeh lecha yiladim? Yiladim, Rebbe? Okay, lama. V'shtecha, how old's your wife? 50, 51. Is it 50 or 51? 50. No, lama shelo yeh lecha yiladim? תלך לפרופסור משיח בביילינסון, תגיד לו שקניאבסקי שלח אותך. אל תשכח להזמין אותי לברית. He called up the fellow in Switzerland that he'd sold the business to and said, this has just happened. He said, Rebbe Laban, I remember when we went together to the biggest fertility experts everywhere in the world. I'll tell you what, if you have children, I'm selling up any business that I have, and I'll come to Eretz Yisrael and I'll come and sit and learn with you. A year later, he had twins, a boy and a girl. Chaim was the sandik. And his good friend, the fellow he'd sold the business to, this millionaire from Switzerland, he's now stuck. What's he going to do? He went to Reb Chaim and he said, look, I said this, but... So Reb Chaim said, no, mitzad the neder ein poischen b'neilad. You could probably get off with the neder. Aber mir durchzach. It seems to me that perhaps the only reason they didn't have children, and that now they have, is you two are meant to learn together. That's what he did. What's the pshat? Reb Chaim would make fun when they told him, and this is just a very small sample. There's a Rosh Yeshiva of a Baal Teshuva Yeshiva in Telstone that I know, and went with some Bochrim, 40 boys. He went into Reb Chaim, and they went for a bracha, bua. And he says to one of them, Im lo tochal basar b'chalav, yeh lecha hatzlacha. Pardon? The boy burst out crying. Afterwards, he told the Rosh Yeshiva, he said, once what happened was the cook, by mistake, served milky ice cream after a Fleischke meal, and I really liked it. And since then, every now and again, I've been having, I couldn't. I should have paraffin, I didn't. Three friends went into Reb Chaim. One of them was a chosen. And they said to Reb Chaim, these two, they want to have a bracha for a zivug, and this one is a chosen. Reb Chaim said to every one of them, Timtzad zivadcha b'karov. No, he's a chosen. Timtzad zivadcha b'karov. He gets home, fax from his kala in Belgium. She's called it off. And more. But what's the pshat really? What's really going on? Rabbi say, it's very simple. And it's sad that we don't understand this. Reb Chaim was not special from the perspective of what he achieved. Every single one of us, in theory, has access to all of that. Kol halomed Torah lishma zoiche lidvarim harbe. V'loi oid. Anybody that learns Torah lishma, not for ego, not for kavod, not for money, not for even for olam haba, but just to be mekusha to the Borei Olam, for 90 or so years, zoiche lidvarim harbe. V'loi oid el shanase ohu v'oyeves hamokoim v'oyeves habriyos v'noisin lo eitzav v'soshia. The whole world is laid out in front of you. It's not a nace. It's not a nace. You just get closer and closer and closer to the Borei Olam. And the Kedusha comes from the Koyach HaTorah. It's the Gevil, he's the Aron HaKodesh. And to the extent that every single one of us learns, even if it's for a minute, but if it is lishma, that means for no other reason, you get into the sugya, you can enjoy it like the Iglei Tal says. It's avada, it's meant to be beautiful, it's meant to be amazing. But realizing that at that moment in time you're alive in the real sense of the word, you're connected to the Borei Olam in the deepest, most meaningful way. That's Kedusha. In the world, everything's Torah. You broke your leg and he told you to learn Ketzid HaRegel. It's not a joke. What is your leg other than, where does your leg come from? It's all come from Torah, which is that which the Rebbeinu Shalom used is tackle by Raiso, Bara Alma. That's where it comes from. So be Masakin, learn Ketzid HaRegel, and it goes away. So it's not a joke and it's not a moifus. It's just you understand, you have the source code, the DNA of Chaim. That's what it is. What did he used to call it? He used to say his chayvus. He spoke often about his chayvus. His learning, the way he referred to his learning was chayvus. I want to share with you a Rabbeinu Yonah. Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah in Brachos, in the Sugi Birchas HaTorah. He asks a question. If you take your tzitzis or your tefillin off and you put them back on, you've got to make a new bracha. How come Torah you don't need to make a new bracha? It's a famous Tosfos, the Rosh. She starts off with, a Yid is never Masiach Das from Torah. You might have to close your Gemara because you have to go to work or you have to do other things. But a Yid is always just a skip and a hop away from going back to V'chayzel Talmudai. That's the Lashon of the Rambam. When you're steerers in whether Oisik b'mitzvah potem and mitzvah applies to Talmud Torah or not, to steer from the Rambam Hilchas Talmud Torah to Hilchas Ishus. But he says, V'chayzel Talmudai, if it's a mitzvah she'i efshal asis alidei acherim, nobody else can do it, you do it, V'chayzel Talmudai. Rabban Kotler used to say, but if you can't be Chayzel Talmudai, then that means you weren't able to. It's always just Chayzel Talmudai, therefore I don't need to make a new bracha because I'm not Mesiach Das from Torah. And that's well known, everybody knows that. I'd like to be Mosif the next piece. And we'll stop here in a minute. There's a Meir de Kazach. Says Talmidei Rabbeinu Yonah, Va'afilu k'shekora b'layla. Have you ever thought about this? Even when you learn Torah at night, really, we should say, why didn't we say Birchas HaTorah tonight? It's a new day. We're learning now. Why is it a new chat? Even though in every other halacha, maybe we say the yom is haylach hachalaya, gabe akriya halayla haylach hachayom. With Torah, it's the other way round. Kidomrinon b'Yerushalmi, Omer Rabbi Yochanan, Anan agira diyamamo, Anan yazfinon b'yamamo, parinon b'leilia. We borrow in the day. We have a chiyuv. I said it here 2 weeks ago. Chayav Shulchan Aruch, you have to be koveya zman bayoim uvalayla every single day and every single night. Not just you have to learn. It doesn't say that. It says in Shulchan Aruch you have to be koveya. Every Yid has to be able to answer the following question: what is your fixed time to learn on Tuesday evening. Shulchan Aruch, it's basic halacha. What is your fixed time to learn on Thursday day? Chayiv likvoya zman bayom uvalayla. Reb Chaim once woke up in the middle of the night. He had high temperature. He missed his learning before Shachris. And then he jumped out of bed with an unusual zrizas, and they said to him, what happened? He said, I just had a dream that I'm going to die today. Und the Rambam steht ad Yom Moisai, I haven't learned yet. I have to learn. It's Yom Moisai, I have to learn. Says Rabbeinu Yoina, Koloimar mishu socher ein lo lehizbatel memlachtoi kol hayom. I've got a job to do. I've got to go to my job. ואנחנו מצווה עלינו לקרוא כל היום, אם כן, כמו פועלים, שאין לנו להסבטל מהקריאה, ומה שאנחנו מסבטלים ממנו ביום הוא כמו הלוואה. I borrow time every day because I've got to go to work. I'm borrowing it. ואנחנו פועלים איסו בלילה. So when we're learning tonight, it's because perhaps today we went to work, we went to school, we had things we had to do. Now we're paying it back. Chayvus. That's what Reb Chaim used to call it. It's chayvus. Do we feel we have chayvus? And therefore, yes, Reb Chaim didn't know his own address. He never had a job. He did one thing. He was one thing and one thing only. Kuloi Torah. No lishma. Just, it's the Eibishter's Torah. He was makusha to the Eibishter through his Torah. Nothing else. And that's the secret. Megadaltoim remamtoi al kol hamaisim. He was the Mora de Kula Shmaitza, said the Chazon Ish when he was 26 years old. From what? Not because he was the biggest guy in Olam, not because he was brilliant, not at all. It's because he felt, he wanted nothing more than to sit and learn. He saw people came to him. He accepted them just because he cared for Yidden. He didn't want anything. He didn't want or need anything. Just his Gemara. And this is the same Mora de Kula Talmuda that didn't eat lunch or supper without his wife. This is what the Eibishter meant when he created Naseh Odom. The gadlus that a mensch can attain from being makusha to Torah. And the chayva, a world without him. Chazon Ish, famous Kabbalah, and Chaim would say it, he heard it from, with the Iraq War, 91, we all remember it. Lo yiplu tilim, ptzatzot b'bnei Brak lo yiyeh. Yesterday 5 people were killed in Bnei Brak. Chaim's not there to be making any more on this. It's an olam masukan without Reb Chaim. 11 people being killed in Eretz Yisrael in the last week. Hasn't been that since 2006. It's a world without somebody who is makusha to the Rabbeinu Shlomo. And maybe I won't finish, or you won't finish Kol HaTorah Kula every year. But he's mechayev us to think about what it means to be makusha to the Rabbeinu Shalom through his Torah, and at least for a few moments every day to cut out everything else. That's kviyus zman. That's what it means. Kviyus zman. It doesn't say how long. It could be 5 minutes. But that is kavua. Every day and every night. Kavua. And in that time, nothing else exists. The phone is off. Everything else is off. And I just want to connect to the Borei Olam through his Heilige Torah. Nothing else. That's what Reb Chaim is mechayev us. That's who he was. Sar HaTorah, where does it come from? Who appointed him? Where did 500,000 people? No, Torah. Without any ego, without any covered, without anything else, just the Rabbeinu Shalom and his Torah. And that's mechayev us. In our own way, at our own level. Rabbeinu Shalom should give us all a chizuk and a hisayrus from Moran. It's a different world. To think about how we can be mizdabek to the Rabbeinu Shalom through his Torah.